an expert at. I'm going to read his bio. Dr. Dodd is
Amy, could I just hold off one
Yes.
second? I'm going to have you do that right before we get started. If anybody wants to go over to the Federal Reserve, or if there's anybody from the Fed here that wants to, say, hey, here's what we're doing in Zoom Room 2, I want to give them a chance to say anything, and just give it maybe 30 seconds for people to go to Room 2 if they haven't yet, or anybody to speak on that.
Yeah. But I'm really excited to.
All right, so in Zoom Room 2 is Federal Reserve Resources, with a panel of presenters from the Fed there. And Amy, I think we'll let you go with that formal reading of the bio.
Excellent. Very good. So Dr. Bucky Dodd is the Assistant Vice President for the Education Strategy and Innovation with LX Studio at the University of Central Oklahoma. And that's where our council is located at UCO. Dr. Dodd is an innovator, master teacher, and visionary of the future of education. As a prolific writer, teacher, and speaker on the future of education, his research focuses on visual planning and collaboration systems, innovation, and the design of learning experiences. Dr. Dodd is a creator of learning environment modeling, an award-winning visual collaboration system for the design and evaluation of learning experiences, and has been recognized internationally for his research and design experience. He has a proven record of leading innovation initiatives in corporate, government, and education organizations, and is consistently sought out as a thought leader on the future of learning. So again, I'm so excited that you guys are going to get to hear from him. I learned so much, and I think our council is absolutely better because of how Dr. Dodd has been able to help support us. Okay, I'm handing it off to you, Dr. Dodd.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. And I think we have someone's microphone on.
I will work on getting that.
Okay. All right, very good.
For you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I just very much value the opportunity to be able to share a little bit about the work that we were able to collaborate on with Amy, and share a little bit about the importance of learning experience design. And when you hear this term, it's quite an interesting thing, because what we do every single day is really designing learning experiences. And what I'm going to talk about in our time today is really some approaches that you can take and adopt right away that'll actually make a big difference in how you develop and design your programs, how you engage with audiences, and ultimately deliver the very best financial and economic education experiences that are possible. But I thought I'd get us off with a little bit of a quiz, I guess I would say. So when you hear the word learning environment, I want you to type in the chat what first comes to mind. So I'm gonna give you a few seconds to do that. Learning environment, first top of mind, what comes to mind for you? Positive, good. Classroom, yeah. Hands-on, exciting, openness to questions, active. Dry air, okay. Classmates, blackboard, canvas, okay, good. Print, rich, interactive rather than passive. Relationships. These are fantastic. So what's interesting, please feel free to keep them coming. When a lot of groups, when I ask this question, what does learning environment mean to you? The most common answer is classroom, right? We immediately go to kind of the way that we've probably all grown up in elementary school. We could think about these classrooms. What's interesting though, your group has brought up some really interesting and I think sort of advanced concepts on this. But I want to challenge you today. Oftentimes on the left, we think about this idea of a classroom where we are sitting in rows, we're listening to people. It's that passiveness. But I want you to compare that learning environment to maybe something like a coffee shop. Think about the differences. Think about the differences in the way people interact in those spaces. Both of these are learning environments, but they have a very distinct and important influence on the way the experiences happen. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Our role as educators is we design environments. We design environments where learning happens. And there is a very big connection between how we design those environments and the experiences that people have, the learning experiences. And what I want to do today is actually sort of stretch our thinking a little bit around this concept, because so many times we think about our role in terms of designing classes or designing seminars or workshops. And really what we need to be thinking is about designing the entire environments, all the spaces and places where learning happens. And I'm going to do this by sharing a little bit about the specific experiences we had together, Amy and I, with the summer academies here in Oklahoma, and really thinking about how we sort of reimagined what was possible. Some of it was the realities that play in terms of being able to bring together and the limitations of bringing together people in person. But also really looking at that core question of how do we create special learning experiences that are truly going to have a transformative impact on the people that we're serving. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about two in particular components. First of all is designing with empathy. And I think this is sometimes is easy to get lost, right? Because we tend to think about we have standards and we have learning outcomes and objectives that we have to make. But in reality, we have to be thinking about the design from an empathetic standpoint. What is the learner's experience? And how do we design those environments that are really learner-centered in that regard? And then I also want to share a little bit about this idea of a new way of lesson planning, and actually have a free resource that I'm going to give you today that you'll actually be able to take and apply right away. So this is what we're going to be talking a little bit about today in terms of learning experience design. So when I use that term learning environment, you can think about it in this sort of way, right? We have physical spaces where learning happens, so kind of the classroom example that came up in the chat, but we also have virtual spaces. So things like Blackboard, Canvas, those things were also shared in there. But we also have interactions that happen asynchronously, so kind of on demand, but we have interactions that can happen synchronously. Now, what's interesting when we start to think about design and designing environments, there's often a whole lot of focus that happens on the physical spaces and in a live setting, the synchronous nature. But what I want to challenge us today is thinking about leveraging this entire spectrum. These are exciting options that we have to help people learn, and they can really, it's not a matter of designing the classroom or designing an online experience, but it really is designing the entire learning environment where these things work together. And this is, I think, sort of a re-envisioning of our role as educators, right? We're not just educators in a physical classroom, but we're educators across all these spaces and places. Now, there's often some really big challenges that come up. I know, and Amy may empathize with this a little bit, you know, when we start on projects, right? We start things off, we tend to think that there's a relatively linear line from the idea that we're designing to the result that we're going to get. And that's, you know, that's good. But the fact is, though, it often happens something kind of like this, right? You know, you've got new criteria coming in, you've got different partners coming to the table, you've got all these different inputs that are having to manage anytime you're delivering an educational program. And this can lead to a lot of frustration. It can lead to miscommunication oftentimes, and ultimately hinder the quality of the learning experiences that we're trying to create. But there is good news, right? There are tools that can help us in this process. And we use these tools with the Summer Academy here in Oklahoma, and really engaged in a design process that was collaborative. It was visual and dare I say fun, which is a word that is not often used when you start talking about designing curriculum and designing programs and things like that. And so when we think about this, this is sort of a mental model of how I like to think about the work. When we think about this, it can be really in a funnel. When you start a project, you often have so many different ideas or options and things like that that you might engage with. And this is where that empathy is so important. Recognizing that we're not doing things to learners, we're doing things with learners. And when we think about that role of bringing them into the design process, it's so important. It's thinking, in our case, it was thinking about what do these teachers need to be successful in the classroom? What are the challenges and struggles that they face? And I'm going to share in just a moment a very practical tool that you can use to actually be able to sort of conduct this empathy building process that is so important when we're designing learning experiences. From there, we really start to narrow the funnel in, where we start to think about, well, how might we help solve these problems that we're facing, the ideation, and ultimately creating a vision for this learning all the way working through a strategy, design, and ultimately getting to a prototype that we can actually put in front of learners. Now, this may be a little bit different model than what some of us are have background in terms of curriculum design. I know it's different than some of my initial training, but one of the things that I've learned through working with collaborative groups is that thinking about that process of working together in this funnel is really important. And we have to have these collaboration and facilitation tools that not only help us to design a learning program or learning experience, but to do it together. And I think that is a really important challenge, that we're increasingly find ourselves in more collaborative situations where we're designing these programs. Not one of us can do it alone. And so when we think about our role in designing programs in terms of a funnel, it helps us to start wide, but work systematically into getting ideas and designs together that can really be tested. And so to help you along this way, I thought what would be sort of fun is I'm going to talk about 2 learning experience design superchargers, right? So what are 2 things that you might be able to put together to use right away that's going to make an outsized difference in terms of how you design classes, how you design curriculum, how you design lessons. And these are 2 things that I found from my experiences that make a big difference. So we're going to dive into those and spend a little time together. So when I work with groups and they're designing programs, educational programs, I often find that there are 3 pretty common starting points that people have, right? The first one is they go right to the content or the topics, and the analog that you can think about this is someone pulls out the textbook and they said, I've got to teach on chapters 3, 5, and 8, right? Those are the topics. So that's one way. The other way that we tend to find are learning objectives or standards, right? So here is the outcome that I'm trying to help learners get to, and then here is sort of how I backward design into that. The third way, which is where I'm going to be focusing our time, my time talking here, is really starting with the experience. And this is that empathy focused point of view that I think gets missed a lot, but it's so critical to the work that we do as educators. To kind of illustrate this point and really how important empathy is, have you ever, you could put a yes in the chat if you'd like, have you ever gone to a door and you pushed, but you actually should have pulled? How'd you feel? Just type in how you felt when that happened. Yep. Silly, dumb, absolutely. There's like one door in one of our buildings here, like downtown in Oklahoma City, that I do this every single time. I know what I'm supposed to do, but every time I mess it up. This is actually an example that was shared from the book, The Design of Everyday Things. This was written in the early 90s. I would highly encourage you to read this if you haven't. But Don Norman, the author of this book, said, we all have this experience, right? We've all pushed instead of pulled. And it's not our fault. We tend to think it's our fault. We sort of project this on us, but it really is the fault of the designer, right? The designer of the door that didn't make it intuitive to push or to pull. And so this is why empathy is so important. Design starts with empathy. It starts with understanding and relating to the experiences of our learners and how that door makes us feel, right? And this is the same principle that happens when we design learning experiences. And it's this big shift. We hear about it where we go from thinking about teacher-centered environments, that topic, this is what I'm going to give people, the banking model, no pun intended, I'm sorry, talking to economic educators here, but moving to a learner-centered model, right? Where we think about the role that the learner has in this process, and we think about their experiences, the goals that they have, the pain points that they're trying to solve, and ultimately the value proposition. What does it give to them, whether it be confidence or manage risk or new opportunities? And this is really the heart of learning experience design. And one of the tools we used together when we were designing the Summer Academy is this tool. It's called a Learner Snapshot Canvas. And this is really essentially creating personas, an empathy map, if you will, of the roles that, of the experiences that a certain personas of learners have. So this is an example of one that we created, and we talked about together the goals that in this particular an experienced teacher who has taught personal finance, what goals do they have? And we talked about things like new and better resources, using valuable use of time, those sorts of things. We talked about their struggles that they have. We talked about, they're irritated when I can't teach personal finance because they want to, right? They struggle with the why. We really tried to orient our thinking around the roles that they have. We talked about their prior experiences. We know that in this particular persona, they had some prior experience with the subject matter. And then we also talked about the value proposition, the why they do what they do. And you'll see here, I thought it was fun. We talked about the benefits that they have in the lives of students, helping to make a change in that regard. And so we use this persona as a way to identify some of these learning strategies that we're going to have a high impact for this program. We talked about ready to use strategies and resources. This group was not ones that they wanted to sit in a class and just hear the different things. They wanted to put their hands on the curriculum, so to speak, and try it out and actually contribute to one another. And we talked about the role that sharing ideas and small group collaboration, the importance that would have in the process. And so you'll see this idea of going from a persona to design strategies really helped us to orient the decisions we made about the learning experience back to the roles that people and the needs that people had. The other thing that we did is we used a visual tool called learning environment modeling. And this is essentially a visual system for designing learning experiences. And the reason why this is so impactful and important is it helps us to take what is in here. We have ideas for programs and things like that we might design, but puts it into a format where we could collaborate. And in our situation, we met on Zoom. We had this visual language that we worked on together. I'll show you here in a moment. And we were able to share ideas back and forth in a much more effective way than if we were just to talk about it. It put ideas into action. And so learning environment modeling is this suite of visual strategy and design tools. It's really focused on helping collaboration happen. So if you're working with even one other person, this can have a really big impact on that work and how to add clarity to conversations around design. It helps us to think about creative solutions. Sometimes as educators, and I am the first person to admit I'm guilty of this, is we get in our pattern, right? We get in our sort of rut of how we deliver and how we teach and things like that. And sometimes it benefits us to sort of creatively collide with other people because it helps us to think about those problems or those situations in new ways. And then finally, learning environment modeling gives us a blueprint for action. And what we ended up doing was we created actually what we do call blueprints that really guided the development of the curriculum in the online setting. It guided the development of the experience in a live sort of virtual or Zoom type setting. And it gave a blueprint for that action to happen. And so we actually use two different things. We use design canvas tools, and we also use this design language. And the design canvas tools, much like the persona that I shared with you a moment ago, are there to get ideas out of your head and onto a framework to think about it, right? They're a visual thinking framework that helps us to understand, obviously, in the situation of the learner persona, but also do a whole variety of thinking around how we design the learning strategy and how we, for example, align curriculum to outcomes. And so these Canvas templates are that first step, right? It's that, if you go back to the funnel, it's that sort of visioning, it's the ideation, that sort of level. But then we also have this other piece that it's a language. These are building blocks. And we did this, of course, virtually. And you can think about when you're designing curriculum, elements of that curriculum can actually be organized in these 5 building blocks. So you have information or things like presentations, maybe articles, videos, things like that. You have dialogue that happens in learning experiences, question and answers, discussions, things along those lines. There's feedback that happens, right? Where the instructor maybe gives learners feedback or learners give each other feedback. There's opportunities for practice, and there's opportunities for people to demonstrate their learning, that evidence of learning. And as I mentioned, we actually did this virtually, But what's really cool is we actually printed them up on Post-it notes. I'm a big Post-it note fan, you know, and so what's interesting about this is when we're using it in Post-it notes, it has a dimension to it where we are inviting people into the curriculum and the learning experience design process in ways that, you know, a spreadsheet or a Word document or something like that really has a hard time to do. Each building block at the top of it, we actually describe the what, the title, if you will. And at the bottom, it's how it's implemented in the learning environment. So, you know, this could be a really, with this one sort of visual, this icon, we know the purpose, we know what it is and how it's implemented. And so it helps us to not only focus the idea, but it helps us to bring that idea into practice. We also have context where learning happens. So things like in the classroom, this online synchronous, online asynchronous, and even experiential. So you think about like on-the-job training or internships and things. And I'll show you how all these pieces of this language kind of come together in a blueprint. And this is actually an actual example of one of the Summer Academy blueprints. And you know, if you see here, you know, we start out with it's a flow, it's a diagram, if you will, of that learning experience where we have a session goals presentation. Then we have a demonstration of the learning design ideation process, collaborative lesson, and so forth. And you'll see there's opportunities for practice and feedback, and ultimately aligning to learning objectives and this evidence of learning. And so what's neat about the process is we could do this all visually, we could do this all virtually, and as a way to engage in a process that that was so impactful and add clarity to what can be a very complex process and situation. So learning environment modeling, or LEM as we like to call it, is really that designing. It can be used for designing brand new learning experiences. And so maybe you have an idea and you want to put a new program out in the market. This is a way to do that. It can be used for reimagining existing learning experiences. And we see this a lot where someone might come to us and they say, you know, we've taught this program for years, and you know, we're tired of lagging results that we're seeing, or people are not engaged like they used to be with it. And so we actually can model out how they currently do it. And what's neat is it sort of highlights or illuminates opportunities for innovation. And so that's a really exciting process. And then often it's really centered around this idea of collaboration and what we call co-design. So the design doesn't come from just one person. It really invites multiple people in the process. And when you're working with people in industry, when you're working with educators, when you're working with researchers, it's that commonality point where people can come together to really share their ideas. So it's this idea of taking what is invisible and making it visible, right? It's the idea of being able to use these facilitation and collaboration tools to not just share an idea, but do it in a way that is collaborative and invites people into the process that conventional ways have a little bit more challenged process to do. I think this is sort of a fun thing because, you know, we didn't just come up out of this with no background. If you're a gamer and you have any sort of affinity to Super Mario Brothers, they actually designed Super Mario Brothers in a very sort of similar way. They actually built it in graph paper, and this is sort of an example, and you can sort of see an article there if you wanted to check that out further. And what they did was they took what is invisible in the mind of the designer of the game, and they put it in a format that invited people to work with it. And I think as educators, we need to do more of that, right? We need to find ways of being able to invite people into the process of designing learning experiences together, because ultimately it's through that collaboration where we can come up with the very best ideas and be able to refine those. So I wanted to, as we close out today and share this with you, I wanted to leave you something that you can actually go take and use and put to use right away. And so we actually have a course that you can go and register for. It's free. And this is all about learning environment modeling basics. I'll put the link to the page where you can go here in the chat if you want to check that out. But what essentially is you'll do is sign up, and then we'll send you a link to Learning Environment Modeling Basics, and it's a very robust course. It actually walks through the different types of building blocks, how you can put them together, and how you can start designing your very own lessons right away using this particular method. So it's a so in closing, I just wanted to sort of leave you, I guess, with some encouragement. And it's kind of related to what I was just mentioning, is when we're able to invite people together to come together and design learning experiences, it opens up an entirely new possibilities that that maybe you haven't thought about before. And it gives you an opportunity to look at learning experiences in new ways. It invites you to bring people that have not maybe been involved in the process before into the process, but ultimately create the very best learning experiences for the people and communities that you serve. And so I want to just sort of thank you for the work you do. I think if you make a big difference in the lives and in the well-being of the communities that we serve. And it's been an absolute pleasure to get to spend a few minutes with you today and share this great work that that Amy and her team have really championed at our university and been a part of. So thank you so much. I'll be happy to take any questions or thoughts in our time remaining together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dodd. Are there any questions? I think it's a lot to take in, but it's something we can all relate to, and we all know that we get in the, hamster wheel of doing things the way we've always done them, and it's good to have this opportunity to look at really what we kind of intuitively know is how things should be done.
Yep, absolutely.
Give it another 30 seconds or so if there's any questions. And if there aren't any, we will take a 5-minute break before our final session, which is a keynote from Jessica Washington from the Federal Reserve on digital payments and the path to financial inclusion. So thank you so much, Dr. Dodd. We'll get everybody over from the other Zoom room in here over the next 5 minutes, and then we'll start with Jessica, probably close to 2:40. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Take a 5-minute break. Feel free to talk on the Zoom room here, or take a little bit of a break if you need to. And we've got our last session, which will be a 40-minute session.
Thank you so much.
Derek, this is Princeton. Did you see my chat?
Yes, I was just gonna just type a response to you. I did email her back and let her know that we were running about 5 minutes behind, and so I would if she isn't on yet, then I would expect her to be on soon.
Okay, perfect. Let me know if I can help from this.
There we go. She's here.
Hey, I'm here.
Okay.
Hello.
Great, Jessica. Thanks. Just wanted to make sure you got the message.
I did. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
So we're going to start just about at 2:40. We've got people in 2 different Zoom rooms. People are coming over from the other Zoom room, which was Federal Reserve Resources, and we just got done with some learning design stuff in here, and people are taking a break, and we'll aim to start at 2:40 if that's okay.
That sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
Oh wait, can you? I am going to share my screen. Can I just do a practice real quick?
Go for it. You've got the ability right now.
Because they make it a lot different. Okay, so there's my PowerPoint.
It says you're started screen sharing, and let's see if it pops the PowerPoint on there. Right now, it's just saying you've started screen sharing, but I don't see the PowerPoint yet.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop the recording from last session.